Welcome, family. At Kingdom Academy, we equip parents in spiritual warfare training so you can raise up your children as spirit warriors, well prepared to stand against the principalities and powers of darkness. Brittany Braswell is the founder of the Joy-Filled Eater and our guest today. And we'll be discussing the effects of negative body image in a parent and how it influences your children, and some of the great strategies to changing bad body image, eating habits, and more. Brittany is also the host of a great podcast called the Joy-Filled Eater Podcast. So make sure to give her a listen, subscribe, and follow. Welcome, Brittany. We are so excited for this conversation today, and I know a lot of parents, especially mamas, are ready to take note. So Brittany, tell us about the Joy-Filled Eater. What was the origins of this incredible direction that you have gone in with your life, and how did the Joy-Filled Eater come to be?
Yeah, as far as I could probably take this in a couple directions. So I've been a dietitian for the last 10 plus years. And I really got into the field of eating disorders, specifically in body image treatment, or treatment of negative body image, I guess, a while back. And I worked in a treatment center setting, meaning like the ladies I worked with lived on site. They were either there getting 24/7 kind of care, or they had daytime programming where they were on site 5 to 7 days a week from like just after breakfast time. So maybe like 8:30 or so until 5 to 6 o'clock, depending on their hours. And so I was really entrenched in the eating disorder kind of area, learned a lot, grew a lot, but I frequently saw the lack of relationship with the Lord impacting these girls' recovery journeys. And on the flip side of that, the clients that I worked with, or the patients that were there, I made it known that I was a Christian, and that if they wanted to talk about their faith, that I was a safe place they could do that. And so the ones who said, hey, I realize either my relationship with the Lord is drastically impacting and motivating this recovery piece, or I feel really distanced from the Lord, and I feel like that's slowing me down, or maybe I've had some sort of spiritual trauma and that has impacted it. They made a lot more progress, a lot faster, sustained their recovery a lot more when they invited the Lord into the process, because he's there the whole time, whether they want to admit it or not. Right? But when they say, hey, I want to put Christ at the center of this, it made all the difference. And so I just saw the abundant joy that brought to a lot of my clients. And most of them, when I would ask them, like when they'd be in the depths of their disordered eating, and the ladies I work with now don't all have eating disorders, but they usually have some kind of fear or anxiety around food, or they feel like they're being controlled by food, or I can't handle myself around that. If I eat that, I'll just eat all of it, or I'm terrified if I eat that, it'll change my body. And so whenever I would ask them, like, okay, what kind of words come to mind when you think of the eating experience or eating this particular food? Like, joy was the last thing from their mind. You know, it was anxiety, it's frustration, it's fear, all rooted in fear pretty much.
Wow.
And so being able to see how they grew from that and the joy and peace they experienced, I was like, that's what we want to aim for. We want to be joy filled in this process. We don't want to be just like struggling to make it through, or putting all these rigid food rules around, okay, here's how you physically recover, and eat this and this much of this and avoid that. That doesn't work. That makes it worse. So yeah, that's kind of how the name came about. And then the podcast came about earlier this year because I like to teach and talk and speak. And I had the opportunity to speak in a lot of different settings. And so I think I've just fell in love with, I became a podcast nerd, like podcast junkie a couple years ago. And I was like, this is the next, like, I don't know why I haven't been doing this from the beginning. So I love it.
And yeah, I listened to some episodes of your podcast and it is really good. So I definitely recommend everybody to check out the Joy-Filled Eater podcast, especially if you're on that dieting cycle, especially if it's a generational thing. And it's really interesting that you're talking about even like how you saw those spiritual connections, because what is fear? Fear is a evil spirit. Like it's a work of the enemy in the spirit realm. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. But usually when we're trying to figure out how to diet, we're trying to figure out how to control our flesh and our blood. But that's why we go through those cycles, because we're not dealing with the root issues, which more often than not are spiritual issues.
Yes. Which is why that's the first place we start. I love that you brought that up, Heather, because literally we have like a module 0 foundations kind of module when anyone comes into the Joy-Filled Eater course. And we start with what are your core beliefs? So what are those things? You may think they're food, body related, or totally not. What are those things that you believe to be 100% true 100% of the time? And we start from there. And it's amazing when I do this, even one-on-one with clients, we could spend, if we're meeting once a week or even a couple of times a month, we could spend multiple sessions just going through like, here's what you say you believe. Now let's figure out where that came from. What happens when you take an action that doesn't align with that belief? What are the fears and the consequences, the self-imposed usually consequences that come from it? So yeah, it's really a huge part of the process is identifying the lies that you're believing, most of which are driven by fear or just lack of awareness, lack of knowledge, even sometimes. And then being able to compare those with scripture. Let's speak some truth into this. Like, let's get rid of the worldly affirmations and I'm great and I'm strong and I'm brave. And it's not that those things are terrible, but they're very me-centered. And if you are trying to talk yourself into something, the enemy can talk you right out of it if you don't have that foundation of truth that you are confident in. And so yeah, we've got to identify those beliefs, a lot of those underlying fears, and then speak truth into that from the word.
I think oftentimes as well, we have these filters, these spiritual filters that we use as excuses for a lot of things. I know that I have in my past, because I was really fit and healthy and like obsessed in an unhealthy way, but with like working out all the time and everything. But at the time in my life, I was going through major trauma. And there also, at that time in my life, there was major trauma that was coming back to my memory that I hadn't dealt with from my past. And during that time, I was working out so hard. When other people would work out with me, they'd vomit because they couldn't keep up. And I was proud of that. Then all of a sudden, my body just started blowing up. And I was like, I don't understand. Like I was low sodium, like all the diet tricks, all the things, all the healthy, all the everything. And eventually I got so sick, I was bedridden. And my body was just progressively, like I was just looking like I was gaining more and more weight. And I was like, what is happening? This is crazy. Eventually I found a doctor online because I couldn't even get out of bed. And she actually helped me understand. She had done a thesis when she was in college on the brain-gut connection. And I found that fascinating because of what we know about the spirit realm. Where does the Lord say the fountains of living water are? In our bellies. And where does joy come from? What do we do when we laugh with joy? We belly laugh.
Belly laugh, yeah.
So it's so interesting because all of a sudden you start realizing, like, and then what does the Lord tell us? To bring every thought captive to the obedience of Christ, to think upon those things that are pure, lovely, and of a good report. And like you were just saying, these women are in fear and they're in concern and worry and anxiety because it's like, oh, I'm hungry and I really would like to eat this, but okay, fine, I'll eat carrots. And I hate carrots, but I'm going to eat carrots. And it's just the suffering that they're bringing on themselves, and they'll go through cycles on and off. And then you wonder why. But then there is this spiritual battle that is being played out. And it's the mind not connecting with the gut, which is a fascinating understanding when you start understanding the spiritual realm with it all.
Yeah. And when you can start understanding how much your thoughts affect your gut. Like the more you get stressed, the more you have things like hormonal changes. And it's really easy to get gut related issues from that. It's hard to like physiologically, it's not just a thought. It's like the thought triggers this physical response in your body. And so it's so interesting how, and beautiful and frustrating how we're designed in this way for our body, like all the different areas of our body to communicate with one another. So when we take those thoughts captive, instead of just trying to go, well, I need some like Pepto-Bismol to settle my stomach. Okay, well, maybe that will help for a little while, but as soon as that fear comes back, or that trigger that is causing you to get stressed out, or that's, you're allowing to stress you out, you get that whole negative physiological response again. And so when we can take those thoughts captive, and I'm not saying that's all there is to it, but that's a huge part of it. We have to start there, because we can't just keep like putting a Band-Aid on the symptoms and the root issues still be there.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting too, because as parents, if you are going through this as a mother or a father, then you have little eyes on you that are watching the whole process. And no matter how much you tell them, eat your carrots, it's healthy, eat your vegetables, go get some exercise, don't eat that, that's bad for you, we'll only eat that sometimes. Your words are not having an effect as much as your actions are. And so what you're thinking and what you're speaking, when they see you in the kitchen going, oh, well, you guys eat the mac and cheese, I can't have any today. They're seeing that self-punishment. They're seeing that suffering. They're seeing that imbalanced understanding of eating and food and mindset and disconnect. And it's affecting them. In what ways have you seen this with like, because it can be a generational thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, I see this span across every age I've ever worked with, from like 8 or 9 years old up until the, people in their mid 70s, and beyond that. But one of the biggest things is that our actions are really important, but we also have to be mindful of our language, because one of the biggest things, and you just gave an example, this is a great example of this, Heather, is that when we refer to foods, and when our kids especially hear us referring to foods as healthy or unhealthy, or this is good or this is bad, or this is clean or this is junk, or we can eat these, but we shouldn't eat these, it essentially assigns morality to food. Mm-hmm. And food has no ability to act morally or immorally, right? Like my peanut butter and jelly sandwich can't go run a red light. And, the pizza that we had for dinner last night can't vandalize, my house. So we've got to get away from the moralizing language and just try to get back to this place where food is emotionally neutral, and it may not feel that way if you feel like, oh, well, this food has control over me. It's not going to feel neutral. We can get back to that place. But we want to demonstrate that to kids too. We also don't want, like you said, we don't want food to feel like either withholding food or pushing certain foods to feel like punishment. Like you have to eat your carrots before you can have your dessert or your whatever it is, because that's again saying, okay, well, this is good and this is better and you should eat these, but you have to limit this. Or, hey, this is just a treat, right? Like that's a big one that we use as parents. It's like, well, let's go get a treat. And it's not that there's anything necessarily like bad or wrong about that word, but when we use it in a way that's like food is a reward, it sends this signal that you have to do something to earn this or deserve it. And you have to be good, you have to do something good. And so when food is withheld as a punishment or a consequence from something, it does the same thing. It emphasizes that like, okay, there was something you were lacking in some area, either you as a person or your actions, and now you don't deserve it. So it gets this idea or this belief in our minds that like, okay, I now have to earn probably not just that food. Maybe it's this whole category of foods or food as a whole. I have tons of clients that don't allow or haven't in the past allowed themselves to even eat until they've done X amount of exercise or they've had maybe certain food groups. I don't allow myself to have that until I've eaten X amount of these different food groups. And it becomes this really unhealthy, rigid, disordered relationship with food.
It's interesting because what you're saying about us not speaking in those certain ways about food is interesting because it's often a generational language that's passed down.
Yeah.
Like the parents usually, we learn, oh, nope, you don't have dessert until you eat all your vegetables. You have to at least eat your vegetables. Why? Because that's what we were taught. And so we believe that's what we're supposed to teach. But we need to understand why we're saying that if we believe that and if we're standing by that. And does it even make sense? And understand that in controlling the language like that, and we're creating addiction mindsets. Because when a child knows they can't have dessert until they do this or this, it becomes that reward system in their mind where they start thinking of dessert as a reward. And that's an addiction mindset, right?
Yeah, that can become really dangerous because when there's certain types of foods that you withhold, anything outside of a medical reason, obviously, like if my child has a peanut allergy, I'm not going to intentionally give them something with a peanut product, right? But we also explain that. We also explain, here's why we don't do this, because it's physically harmful to your body in whatever way. And so when it comes to our language and our actions around food, we want to try to stay away from that moralization. We want to offer a variety of foods, offer them in a variety of ways as often as we're able and we can. And we've got to make sure that, again, we're either not bribing with food, which is so hard, especially I'm thinking like back to the potty training days where at school, like even when my kids were at school, like they'd get, an M&M or a Skittle or something when they go to the bathroom. And it's not that you can't like give your kids extra, snacks. And we like to use the term fun foods in our house instead of like what somebody might typically say is unhealthy or junk. Like we call them fun foods. It's a totally different connotation. And so being able to say like, hey, yes, we can absolutely still have these. And if we only eat these, probably not going to feel good because we're going to be missing out on other stuff. And so making sure we talk about not just the nutritional benefits of foods, but like what other benefit do we get? When we have M&Ms, there's an extra level of satisfaction and enjoyment there, right? Or maybe it's something that's really colorful. And so it adds some visual appeal to our plate, right? If you have a little scoop of M&Ms or get the same concept with like a variety of, like a fruit salad, fresh fruit, it brings some color to the plate. And so being able to talk to our kids, again, with neutral language on some of the different benefits of foods, physically, health-wise, physical health and otherwise, can be a really beneficial starting place for that.
The concept of the morality of food is really, I don't know, I think it's kind of revolutionary because if you think about it, we do that. We say this is good food, this is bad food. And by saying this is good food and this is bad food, we are training our minds in an understanding that good food is bad, gross, yuck, we don't want it. And bad food is good, yum, a reward system. So we're literally training our minds that anything good morality-wise is yuck, gross, I don't want to do that. Morality, the goodness of that is bad. It's interesting. Like there's almost like a very subtle mind training in that has a more powerful force behind it than I think what we realize. And then again, we go back to scripture and there's life and death in our tongues. So we're literally making our bodies sick by speaking these types of food moralities.
Yeah. And what's so disheartening, I think, about it, Heather, is that we don't even realize we do this, but we kind of transfer that onto ourselves. Like, okay, if I eat a food that I'm calling bad, then that makes me bad. Or now I'm going to feel some level of guilt because I either think I did something bad, or shame because I am a bad person now because I did this thing that was bad. And so it's maybe starts off with guilt and then it goes straight to shame. And shame is a huge driver of a lot of disordered thinking and behaviors. And so when we can let go of that language and morality around food, that is like a new gateway to escape the guilt and shame that we associate with ourselves according to the way that we nourish or withhold nourishment from our bodies.
Yeah. You said you have a course. What does your course focus on?
Yeah. So the Joyful Eater course is essentially the step-by-step process that I walk all of my private coaching clients through. And it covers an array of really the entire process from beginning to end of starting off going, I really don't know anything about maybe why I eat the way I do or why I believe what I do about food or my body. And it's really designed for the Christian woman who's like, I want to figure out how to either not let food control me, to not let my fears around food control me, to stop hating my body or feeling like it always has to change. And so we walk through this process. I kind of have split it into like 4 phases. The first phase being identification, where we're identifying those fears and lies that we believe. We are learning how to identify what thoughts and what scriptures can we use to actually challenge those. We're identifying how we see ourselves and our body. We move from there into kind of what I would consider the identity phase, where we're looking at what am I allowing to determine my perceived worth and value? So we kind of split that into how do I see myself? How do I see God? And where might the enemy be influencing that, especially when it comes to body image? Body image is a huge piece of that identity puzzle for so many people. And then we move from there into more of the intentionality phase. And this is where we start digging in a little bit more to understanding the goals that we actually have set for ourselves. How do we recognize, is this a beneficial goal or is it not? What's driving me closer to the Lord? It's where we learn a little bit more about how food actually impacts our body and dive into the nutrition piece of things, because we can't start there. If we start with the nutrition piece, and this is coming from a dietitian, okay, you can't start with nutrition, because if you do that, you're going to create a whole new set of food rules, and it's not going to be any good. You got to kind of uproot some things before you start laying down a new foundation. So we talk about nutrition, we talk about metabolism, we talk about how do we start nourishing and moving our bodies in a way that honors our body, and it's not just out of a place of fear or obligation. And then we move into what I would consider like the intuition phase, where we're learning now, how do I start recognizing and honoring my body with gentle nutrition? How do I recognize what signals it's trying to send me, so that instead of defaulting to a meal plan or some kind of diet that tells me what to eat, I can start learning how to really trust my own body and get back to that place where I can tell what is nourishing me, what do I enjoy, what feels good on my body, what kind of exercise or movement actually gives me energy versus like knocks me out or makes me feel like this, it's just a drudgery, I have to do it kind of thing. We want to get back to a place of joy with those. And then especially kind of in that last sort of, I would consider it like the sustainability, like our last module, we're really diving into how do we lean into the Holy Spirit's voice? Like, how do we really lean into partnering with the Holy Spirit moving forward, so that you are not relying on me or not relying on a diet, not relying on anybody to try to, for the long term, feel like you have to rely on anybody else to know what to eat, how to eat, when to eat, how to adapt, when you go on vacation and your meals are different, or when you move to college, or when you become an empty nester because your kids are out and you're no longer preparing meals for, 4 or 5 or 6 people and it's back to 2. So it's this really intentional process to try to help you not backtrack, because oftentimes, like I said, somebody might want to start at that nutrition piece, and then a trauma comes up and you're like, okay, we got to push pause. We got to go back. And now we got to talk about this. So it is 10 years worth of, here's the conversations we've had. Let's order them in such a way that everything actually builds upon what we've already learned, so that you can effectively and sustainably continue to grow closer in your relationship with the Lord, in your relationship with food, and with your body.
It's interesting how when we start walking this life with the Lord, we start realizing that every problem we have in the physical and in the flesh is actually dealt with in the spiritual. And when those things in the spiritual are dealt with, then the yokes and the bondage and the chains break in the physical. But it's also interesting for even parents, because many parents who have children who are suffering, they're overweight or they're not well nourished because they're super picky eaters and things like that. And the parents are always trying to figure out how to fix that in the children. But it seems like from all the things you're saying, and I agree with that, that it's the parent. If the parent gets that balance and that healing and that restoration in them first, if that thinking changes in their minds, then they'll start living that out. And that's the beginning process of getting that freedom and that restoration for your children.
Yeah, it's got to start with us, right? And it doesn't end there, but we can't be trying to say one thing or teach one thing to our kids and then see something totally different reflected, right? We've got to try to be an example as much as we can, knowing that yes, we can't totally control their behaviors. I love my children and I do need to give them some instruction and they've got to have structure. But ultimately, I don't get to determine what they think or how they feel or the vast majority of their actions. And so if they can see me nourishing my body and moving it in a way that feels good and talking about food in a way that doesn't demonize it or praise it, it becomes a lot more fun. I did a podcast episode just recently on how to help your kids with gentle nutrition. And so like, how do we get into this place where we're not using moralizing language, and how can we make food really fun? We do not have green thumbs so much at our house, but we have been able to keep a few plants, like potted plants, alive on our front porch. And one of them is like a bell pepper plant. It's a couple different varieties. And bell peppers are like my most favorite vegetable. And I guess because of that has become one of my kids' favorites. And,
look at that.
Yeah. And so we pulled one off not too long ago, and I forget what color it was. And I let my kids pluck it off the plant when it was done. We washed it, we sliced it, and they had a couple of slices of bell pepper served with all the whatever other food that we had on the plate that night. And we gave them a little bit of like Italian dressing or something to dip it in. And they had bell peppers before, but my son took a bite, and I think I got it on video. And he goes, "Mom, this is the best bell pepper I've ever tasted in my whole entire life." And I was like, "Well, why do you think that is?" And he was like, "Because I helped grow it. Like God grew it, but I got to help." And so when they get to get involved in the process, whether it's helping to grow something, which again, we have a tomato plant, one teeny little, what do we have? Strawberries. Like it's just those three. And they make up a teeny tiny fraction of the produce that we consume in our house. But it's like a hands-on project. And so when my kids get in the kitchen, they are way more likely to try whatever we eat if they had a hand in the process. If they get to crack the eggs or stir or slice or smash a banana or whatever we're doing. And they get to see like the way it ends up isn't always the way it starts. And I get to see what it looks like through, and I get to see how it changes. And Daddy, I helped make dinner tonight. It brings a new level of joy and involvement, and they get to see how you talk about and relate to the food along the way. So you get teaching opportunities to say, "Hey, look what this food is doing for us." Or, "Hey, look," we get nerdy about it sometimes and go, "Oh, look, this has some carbohydrate. What are we missing? Okay, we're missing some protein and some fat. What else can we add to it?" And they can start seeing food in a really fun way that also helps them learn, what's it doing for my body.
That's really interesting, because that doctor who had helped me, she had grown up in India. And when we were talking, because I ended up I got her training program at the time, and it did bring healing to me. But one of the things she talked about was in India, it's very different from America in the sense that they don't eat food for pleasure. They eat food for health. So they learn, like what you were just saying, they learn what food is medicine. So why are we eating this? Why would we eat turmeric? Because turmeric's anti-inflammatory. And why would we eat this? Or why would we eat this? And, oh, well, I need this. I need more energy, or I think I need to think more clearly for a test. Then I need to eat this or this. And if kids can learn like what food can do for them, healthy foods, then it's exciting to eat it, because it's like you can kind of power up and level up in the in the game kind of thing, like.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that part of the process can be really helpful and fun for them to learn about nutrition in a fun way. And I think we also like keeping that in mind, because we don't want to ignore nutrition, but keeping that in mind, I have to be really careful, or I've had to talk to a lot of my clients about being careful not to only refer to food as, nutrition or like the kind of food as medicine idea, because even though that is like, we want to have a healthy perspective on food, something positive, we also don't want that to be the only purpose, because, if we weren't meant to enjoy food in a variety of flavors, we would have had God probably could have just like spared creating taste buds, right? Like we wouldn't have to have that, right? It's like we could all be fed by manna every single day or whatever he picked. And so being able to say like, hey, let's choose some foods, like when we're focusing on food for nutritional benefits, let's also consider satisfaction, right? I don't want to eat a food or a meal just because it's quote unquote healthy or nutrient dense. I want to enjoy it also. So is there something that could be added that would make it even more enjoyable? And also when we're looking at it from the other side, like maybe we're going out to eat or we're having something really fun that is a food maybe we don't choose to eat that often, and it has a little less nutritional depth to it, than to go, okay, I'm choosing a meal for satisfaction, but maybe I can consider nutrition. So same thing, like, is there something while I'm eating out, I can choose what I like, but then is there something that it's missing that I could add to it for a little nutritional boost? And we don't have to do that every time. Like we don't want to be rigid about it or say every single meal all day, every day has to be balanced. That, I mean, for a mom, that is just, I think it is definitely out of my reach. Like not every meal we have is going to be balanced, and that's okay. Like it's okay for one of the purposes of food to be enjoyment and satisfaction. We don't want that to be our only source of satisfaction. That's where it can get disordered and become like food is my crutch kind of thing, or I've had a bad day and now I feel like I have to have that one thing. But I think there is a really beautiful way to combine both, and where you can enjoy your meals, but also your body's still feeling really great, so that you can see the nutritional benefits, but also benefits that might be like cultural, right? There's foods that we have in the South that I especially love because it's just like traditional, like chicken and dumplings and whatever, all kinds of stuff. You might have a food that is not highly nutritional, but the big benefit is that maybe it's providing a medium to connect relationally with somebody. Like if I go out to coffee with someone, I've got my coffee at home. I just make normal drip coffee, like nothing fancy. But if I go to Starbucks or to a fun coffee shop, I'm probably going to get like a Frappuccino or something I can't make at home. And is it super nutritionally dense? No. Does it need to be? No. Because I'm going out to connect with someone, and it might give me an opportunity to pour into them, for them to pour into me. And so it gives us that great opportunity to look at what we're consuming outside of only what is this doing for my body.
That's awesome. And then I was thinking, even as you were saying that, not just teaching them about the nutrition of food and how it can benefit you is good, but you don't want to just make it all about that, because then again, It becomes obsessive and all about the natural food all the time kind of thing. And It made me think of this missionary family that came and stayed with us when we were young. And my mom had made this big dinner and we all sat down at the table with them, and they were from France. And my mom and dad had wine and they poured it for the parents. And the parents are like, can we get 2 more glasses? And my mom was like, sure. And she brings out 2 more glasses and they pour the wine and hand it to their 2 kids. And their one kid is like 12 and the other one's 8. They only pour like an inch or so of it, but they hand it to their kids. And my parents were like, what are you doing? And we're sitting there going, what about us? We want to try some. But in the European culture, they actually teach their children how to pair wine with their foods. So they give their children just a little bit so they can taste it and know what it tastes like with the foods. Well, because they do that, they also have less alcoholism rebellion as the kids grow into their teenage years, because it wasn't forbidden, which is really interesting to me. I'm not sure if I'd necessarily want to go exactly that route, but it's
I understand the concept.
Yes, it's that concept of now that it hasn't been forbidden to them, they don't get into their teen rebellions and want to go drink because they know how to properly drink. They know that wine is paired well with foods, and you don't drink wine to get drunk, but it's part of your eating experience. It's part of the joy part, which was really intriguing to me as I grew up and I thought about it. Because as a kid, we just thought it was so unfair. They got to sip on wine and we didn't. And my mom was just like blown away because it's like, wait, what?
Because that's not how we do it culturally, right? So there can be all kinds of differences there, and we kind of have to decide individually what matters to us, where do priorities lie, and how can we try not to overly impose our beliefs onto our kids? How can we just help them like to be informed and help them to think critically? Because when there is a lot of like, hey, I have had so many clients I've worked with that their parents would like essentially lock up their pantry or their fridge. They weren't allowed to get anything out of it unless they had specific permission. And when things like that happen, if they were at school or at a friend's house and they were offered some type of food that their parents didn't keep in the house or never allowed them to have, then it would turn into this big secrecy thing on, I have to eat this in private so nobody knows, because then I'm going to be either in trouble or I'm going to feel guilty or shameful. And so we've got to consider those kind of behaviors too. And so like something that we have personally decided in our house is we're going to keep foods that are sweet, foods that are a little less nutritionally dense, foods that are fun and enjoyable. And we're going to offer them. Like we're not like, sometimes I will put dessert out at dinner time. We won't wait till afterwards. And that helps kids to know like, okay, I also have all these things at one time. I'm not eating this to earn that. And it's not all the time, but we change things up. And so it just gives them that opportunity to see like, I'm allowed to have these things, and they can regulate themselves now. Like most of the time, I mean, sometimes we do this as adults. Sometimes we like eat in a way that doesn't leave us feeling great afterwards. But like my son had, there was one time when he was still kind of learning about different kind of foods and how it makes his body feel. And he's still on that journey as well. But he had some kind of like Sour Patch Kids or gummy bears. And he was eating several of them. And I had offered them to him. We had gone out and gotten them, it's just like a fun little afternoon outing that happened to be a part of it. And so he was eating them, and I had said, hey, you might want to slow down a little bit so you can tell, when your tummy's full. And so at one point he had eaten a little past what he thought, or eaten a little past what I thought was probably going to feel good. And probably 15 minutes later, he goes, Mommy, I have a tummy ache. I said, yeah, buddy. I said, remember when I told you probably need to slow down because you don't have any other food in your tummy right now. Like if you had that with a meal, you'd have some other food too, and it probably wouldn't, make your tummy feel the same way. And so he was able to connect that. It wasn't this was bad, you did a bad thing. It was just that observation of, hey, here's what happened. This might be related to that. No good, no bad, just this is what we observed. So since then, when he eats gummy bears or candy or something, a lot of times he doesn't even finish what he's got. He'll eat until he gets to the point where he's like, okay, I'm done. I'm going to save the rest for later. Will you put these in a baggie for me? And I'm like, okay, sure. And he'll either say I'm full, or I don't want my tummy to hurt, or I want to have some room for something else later. And so he's at the point where, I don't have to hide candy in our house. He knows that when he wants it, he can say, hey, Mommy, can I go ahead and have some? If it's close to dinner time, I'll say, let's wait until dinner or after. But for the most part, like we'll either enjoy something sweet or whatever it is, or we'll say, hey, let's have that, but let's don't have it on an empty stomach. What can we pair with it to still enjoy it, but also still help our bodies feel good?
You said earlier about the course that you have, how like the beginning part of that course, the foundational stuff is really teaching people how to think different and think about why they eat things, why they don't eat things, so where those thoughts are coming from. That's critical thinking skills over our eating. I don't fully like the term because the new age uses it a lot, but it's mindful eating. It's thinking through a process before you choose to eat it instead of just seeking it for pleasure or comfort or reward. And basically, when he ate all those gummy bears, your son, and he got sick, then you talked with him about it afterwards, which helped him critically think through the process. And now every time he's eating gummy bears, he's more cautious because he's thinking about what he learned with you as you guys talked through it together. And children are like that. It's so amazing. I think sometimes we don't realize how smart they are, but they're like little sponges and they pick that stuff up. And I mean, yes, their prefrontal cortex doesn't fully develop till they're 25 years old, but it's developing constantly. And if you are training them in using their mind in those ways, and they see you using your mind in those ways, they'll pick up those same habits, those same thinking skills. And just even like teaching him that, he will start using that and applying that in other areas in his life.
Yeah. And when you can go about it, leaving the guilt and the shame piece of things off, then it doesn't become, oh, shame on me, I shouldn't have eaten all of this. It's, hey,
lesson learned.
And now, lesson learned. And now next time, maybe I'll make a little bit different choice, or I'll have it in a different capacity. And so I think that's the most important key to all of this is we can have the education. Nutrition matters, but it's also not ultimate. We can't put our physical health above our spiritual health, because then we let physical health overflow, and the pursuit of it can become, you mentioned like kind of that obsession around eating healthy sometimes. And the term orthorexia is kind of what we use to describe that. Like, I have to eat clean. I'm very obsessed with, numbers or calorie counting or certain types of like food that I deem really nutritionally valuable or very high quality or organic, non-GMO, add all the labels. It's not that there's anything wrong with those foods, but when those become like, when we put those things up on a pedestal and our physical health kind of becomes an idol, it becomes real dangerous.
Yeah, totally. I wanted to just talk a little bit before we close out. I want to talk a little bit more about body image, because children often have poor body images of themselves. Other kids make fun of other kids for their little baby fat and body images. But parents also play a huge factor into that by their words, as we've been talking about, that they often use. Things like, oh, my pants are too tight after eating all of that. Or, you put your bathing suits on. Mommy, why aren't you putting a bathing suit on? Mommy doesn't look good in a bathing suit. Or those kinds of things, we don't understand the effect it's having on them, because then they look in the mirror and go, well, I look like mommy. So do I not look good in a bathing suit?
Yeah.
So how do those, how can we change? What are some things you would recommend that a parent can start doing now to help bring healing and restoration and change to the poor body images they and or their children might have?
Yeah, this is one of, I feel like, the most tender subjects that I talk about, but I talk about it on a daily basis. I think I could count on one hand the number of clients I've had that haven't had actual struggles with body image, if they've had a struggle with food. Sometimes it starts with food, but most of the time it starts with, I don't like the way I see my body, so now I have to change the way I eat or move or whatever it is. So when it comes to our body, I think some really simple things is still, we want to take, again, the morality kind of piece out of it. We have to know that people are created with all different shapes and sizes of bodies, and there's no one best, right, perfect, only way that we need to look. It would be absolutely ridiculous if I wear like a size 6 shoe. I'm very short. That's just, my feet are not going to change. So it would be entirely ridiculous if I was like, I should really be wearing a size 7, or I should really be trying to fit into a size 5. When my foot is never going to do that. It is not ever naturally going to do that. I would have to have some kind of crazy surgery, or, I guess pregnancy, your feet swell. Outside of that, like, they're not going to change. There's no shame in having the same size foot that I'm going to probably have for the rest of my adult life. And so when we are in a body shape or size that we are not happy with, and our kids hear us talking about, well, I can't wear that, or I need to constantly be on a diet to change my body, it again sends this signal that, like, your body isn't good enough until blank, right? My body is not good because, it needs to be in jean sizes that are 4 sizes smaller. Or I want to be able to wear this shirt, but my tummy I don't like the way my tummy looks in it. And it's really interesting to see, again, kids are sponges. The way that we talk about our bodies, they tend to pick up on and talk about theirs. There's this video that I show a lot of my clients. I have it linked in my course, and I think Dove puts it out. And they have a series of videos called Dove Legacy. And there's one where they do like a series of interviews with moms and daughters. And then one of the questions they ask for this particular video is, it's 2 things. It's if you could change one thing about your body, what would it be? And then they ask, again, the moms and daughters this, and then they ask them afterwards, like, what's something about your body that you like? And all of their answers mirror one another, all of the moms and daughters. So like one of the moms says something about like, I don't like my stomach. And the little girl says, well, I don't like my stomach. And they're asking them separately. They're in separate rooms, separate times. They get to the end and they're asking them, what do you like about your body? And one of the moms says, well, I don't always love my legs, but I love how strong they are. And I love that they help me run fast because I really enjoy like being active was something that she really liked. And she didn't always love the shape of her legs, but she loved that they were strong. And the little girl said, I like my legs because I can run fast like a cheetah or something to that effect. Right. And so it's not only like, obviously we don't want to be critical of our children's bodies, but they'll pick up on it when we're critical of our own. And they will assume oftentimes, even if our bodies don't look the same, they'll start criticizing their own. I will never forget my very first client that I ever had with an eating disorder in the treatment center setting. When I asked her, why now? What makes you decide now is the time that you want to really commit and go all in on recovery? She said, my 2-year-old son, I heard my 2-year-old son making funny noises in the bathroom. So I went to check on him and he was spitting in the toilet. And I asked him what he was doing. And he said, that's what you do, Mommy. And he had seen her making herself sick. She had been struggling with bulimia and she lost it. She broke down and she was like, he can't see that. That doesn't need to be something that he even has the opportunity to experience. And it broke my heart for her. And she was like, that was all I needed. Like he wasn't making himself sick. He was just spitting because he had seen her make herself sick. And it's the vast majority of the women, especially that I work with, their body image started with something at home, even if it was a compliment. So like somebody may have said, whether it was a parent, a sibling, a grandmother, I don't know why. For my generation, oftentimes it's grandmothers too, because I guess just that generation, there's a lot of aesthetic focus. And they'll say like, hey, my grandmother or my mom or my aunt commented on the way I looked in a certain outfit, or I had accidentally lost some weight after being sick for a week. And they made a comment on, oh, you look great. And for them, that triggered this, okay, well, they used to not say that. So this must be more acceptable and this must be better. And they love me more. They're paying more attention now. So now I have to maintain this or I have to lose more. So anytime we just really have to be cognizant, not only of the way we speak to our kids about their bodies. I love to tell my daughter, you're beautiful, but I don't say you're beautiful because your stomach is this way or your legs are this way or your hair is this way. And so when we can not pick apart our own bodies or theirs, whether it's supposed to be a compliment or whether it's a critique, it makes all the difference.
It's interesting too, because sometimes as a parent, you can sit there and say you're beautiful and compliment your child. But when they get into those early to mid-teen years and they start looking for outside approval and outside opinions, that's when they'll really start mimicking whatever you truthfully do. And even like that little boy who realized what his mommy, or thought he understood what his mommy was doing, we think we can hide things and we think we're doing things in secret, but children see and hear so much and they don't always respond to what they're seeing and hearing in the moment. So you think that they didn't see it and that they didn't hear it, but they are. And they do. And eventually you see it reflected as they're growing up that they did see it and they did hear. I'm sure she never intentionally did that in front of her son. And yet he somehow understood what she was doing in that bathroom with the door closed because of what he heard. So he was imitating it, how he understood it. Yeah. And that's so powerful because we really do think we can do things in secret. And as parents, your children are seeing and hearing everything. And it's really powerful for body image. And it's interesting because what can you say? Like, what steps can you give? Like, it begins with your healing as a parent. Everything begins with your healing as a parent. And if you have body image issues, if you have weight issues, if you have food, morality of food issues, then these are things that you have to become aware first that these are things that you're dealing with. And then you have to realize what is an issue and why it's an issue. And then you have to go to the Lord with it and get the Lord to help direct you where to go so that you can get that help. Because your little ones are mirrors of you and they will mirror you no matter what you say. No matter how much you tell them, don't do what mommy's doing, don't do what daddy is doing, they will. And even if they grow up saying, I'll never do what mom did, I'll never do what dad did, they will.
They will.
Because that's just how it works. So when those strongholds are broken off your life, then it will break it off your children's and their future generations. So it's powerful and important to seek that wisdom and that understanding and acknowledge it. And there's kingdom people who can help you, like Brittany. You can help people work through this. And sometimes we just need somebody to walk alongside us in it. Yes, we think sometimes we can do it alone. Sometimes we think we can do it alone, but usually we can only go so far alone, especially when we've been conditioned to think and speak in a certain way for so long. But if you have somebody walking alongside you, ministering to you, pouring into you, who understands it more than you do at this moment, then that person can help encourage you and uplift you and hold up your arm when you feel weak and when you feel like you can't do it or you don't understand it. And that's when healing and transformation comes. And that's how the body of Christ works, which is so beautiful. And then when your children see that you are willing to do this and can do this too, to seek help, to seek support, to seek restoration, then your children will also know that it's okay to seek help, to seek support, to seek restoration. And that's priceless.
It's part of the goal.
Yeah. I am so thankful that you helped us understand and see these things today. It was amazing, Brittany. And I would love if you could just share with everybody how they can find you and if there's anything else you want to share with them, to just give them the information of how they can do that.
Yeah. Y'all can absolutely hang out with me on the Joy-Filled Eater podcast. Currently, we release new episodes every Tuesday. There are a ton of episodes on, I say a ton. We've been going since January. We're in the 30s or 40s on episodes right now. But there's probably at least a third of the episodes that are specifically related to body image. And then the rest are going to be related to either food freedom or faith in some way. So there's a lot of great resources there as a place to get started. And I love connecting with people through my website. I've got a page there. If you just go to BrittanyBraswellRD.com, and it's BRASWELL. So I see it spelled lots of different ways, but BrittanyBraswellRD.com. There is a link at the top that says resources, or you can even just put /resources. And there's some free resources there. There's links to the Joy-Filled Eater course. If you feel like, hey, I really want to get started. It is open at the time of this recording. It's open all year round. And it's a great place to get support there. So yeah, y'all connect with me on the website, on the podcast, and I'm on Instagram as well at Brittany Braswell RD.
Thanks so much for joining this conversation with us. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a review. For episodes, offers, or guest information, please visit us at rainandjoy.com/Spiritwear Academy or join us on Instagram at rainandjoy and click the link in the bio for access.